The first sign that my marriage was in trouble wasn't another woman. It wasn't a secret phone. It wasn't even a lie. It was a declined credit card. I remember the exact moment because I was standing in the checkout line at a grocery store on a Tuesday morning holding a carton of milk, a package of chicken, a bottle of shampoo, and the prescription my doctor had told me not to skip. The cashier smiled politely. "Your card was declined." I blinked. "Could you try it again?" She did. Declined. The woman behind me shifted her weight and glanced at the growing line. I felt heat rush into my face. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from my husband, Daniel. 7 words. "Don't use the card anymore. Ask me first." I stared at the screen. For a few seconds, I honestly thought it had to be a joke. Daniel and I had been married for 21 years. We had never been rich in the way people imagine rich. We didn't own a yacht. We didn't have a vacation home on some private island. We lived in a comfortable house outside Dallas, drove ordinary cars, and had spent years building a quiet life. Our mortgage was manageable. Daniel owned a construction company that had been doing well for years. Our daughter, Emily, was 24 and living on her own. From the outside, our life looked stable. So why was my husband suddenly telling me to ask permission before I spent money? I left the groceries behind. I walked out of the store without saying another word. Once I got into my car, I read his message again. "Don't use the card anymore. Ask me first." I called him. No answer. I called again. Still nothing. Then I sent him a message. Why was my card declined? His answer came less than a minute later. "We're cutting expenses. I'll explain tonight." I looked at the steering wheel. Something didn't feel right. Not because we couldn't afford groceries. We could. But because Daniel had never talked to me that way. Not once. He had always been the one saying things like, "Get whatever you need. Don't worry about it. We're doing fine." And now, suddenly, I needed permission to buy shampoo? That was the moment I stopped thinking about the card and started thinking about my husband. When I got home, the house was empty. Daniel had already left for work. I put my purse on the kitchen counter and stood there for a long time. There was something strange about being in your own home and realizing that you might not know what was happening inside it. I looked at the refrigerator. There was a reminder from our daughter about her birthday dinner, a flyer from the dentist, a grocery list I had written that morning. Everything looked normal. That somehow made it worse. I opened the drawer where we kept household documents, insurance papers, tax records, mortgage statements, old passports, the kind of boring paperwork no one touches unless something goes wrong. I don't know why I opened it. Maybe instinct, maybe fear. Maybe some part of me already knew that Daniel had been hiding things. At the bottom of the drawer was a folder I didn't recognize. There was no label. I opened it. Inside were bank statements. Not the statements from our regular joint account. These were from another account. Daniel's name was on them. I scanned the first page, then the second, then I stopped. The balance was over $600,000. I read it again. $642,318. I sat down. That number didn't make sense. I knew roughly how much money we had, or I thought I did. Why would Daniel have more than $600,000 in an account I'd never heard about? Then I noticed something else. There were transfers, large ones. $18,000, $32,000, $46,500, $71,000, all going to the same company, Westbridge Holdings. I had never heard of it. I picked up my phone. I searched the company name. A business listing came up. Commercial property, investment management, real estate. My heart started pounding. I called him again. No answer. This time I didn't leave a message. Instead, I grabbed my purse and I drove to the bank. The branch manager recognized me. Her name was Claire. She had helped us refinance the mortgage years earlier.
She smiled when I walked in. Then she saw my face. "Are you all right? I need to ask you something." "Of course. I think I need to understand our accounts." She looked at me for a second. "Which account?" "All of them." She guided me into a private office. I handed over my identification, then I gave her the statement. She looked at it.
Where did you get this?
"It was in my house."
She looked back at the screen. Okay. What is this account? I can't discuss an account unless you're authorized on it. I understand. I pointed at the statement. But I need to know why money from my household is moving into this company. Claire became very still. Is the account connected to your husband? Yes. She nodded. Do you know about a trust? I stared at her. What trust? She didn't answer immediately. Claire, I think you need legal advice before I say anything else. Those words made my stomach drop. Why? She lowered her voice. Because if you are the beneficiary of what I'm looking at, this is much bigger than a credit card. I couldn't speak. A beneficiary of what? She looked at me carefully. Your mother established a trust. I laughed nervously. My mother died 3 years ago. She left me some jewelry and a few personal things. There was no trust. Claire shook her head. That's not what our records show. I felt my hands getting cold. What do the records show? That your husband was listed as a financial manager for the trust. I stared at her. Manager? Yes. Not owner? No. I looked at the statement again. How much was in it? Claire didn't answer. Please? She took a breath. The original value was more than $1 million. I felt the room go quiet. More than $1 million. My mother had died without telling me. My husband had known, and somehow money connected to that trust had ended up in accounts I had never seen. I pushed my chair back. How much is left? Claire looked at the computer. That's the part you need to discuss with an attorney. How much? She finally looked at me. Less than half. When I got home, my daughter Emily called. I answered. Hey, Mom. Hi, sweetheart. She immediately noticed something. What's wrong? Have you talked to your father recently? She hesitated. Yesterday. About me? Another pause. Why are you asking? Because he froze my credit card. What? Exactly. Emily was silent. Then she said something I will never forget. Dad asked me yesterday whether Grandma ever gave me any documents. I stood up. What documents? I don't know. Emily. She sighed. Mom, he asked me whether Grandma ever talked to me about money. What money? The inheritance. My heart started pounding again. What inheritance? Mom, I think Grandma knew something. That night, Daniel came home at 7:15. He walked through the front door, dropped his keys on the table, and kissed me on the cheek, just like normal. How was your day? I looked at him. You froze my credit card. His smile disappeared. We need to talk about that. I went to the bank. He went completely still. What did they tell you? That's an interesting question. Linda, what is Westbridge Holdings? He stared at me. Who told you about that? I found the statements. He ran a hand across his face. You shouldn't have been looking through those documents. My documents? Our documents. No, my money. He looked away. I could see him searching for something to say. Finally, he sat down. Your mother set up a trust. I know that now. I was supposed to manage it. Manage it? Yes. Then why didn't you tell me? Because she asked me not to. I stared at him.
My mother asked you to hide my inheritance from me? She believed you'd make emotional decisions. I felt something inside me break. She believed that about me? No. He looked down. She believed that about us. I almost laughed. Then why is my money sitting in a company account? It's an investment. How much did you invest? He didn't answer. Daniel? Most of it. How much? Linda, please. How much? He finally said it. About 800,000.
I stepped back. $800,000? It's not gone. Where is it? It's tied up in properties. Whose properties? Our investment company. Yours. He didn't deny it. Why did you freeze my card? His answer changed everything. Because I need cash. I didn't sleep. At 2 a.m, I went downstairs. Daniel was in his office. I saw light under the door. I stood there for a moment. Then I walked in. He looked up. What are you doing? I can't sleep. He closed his laptop. What do you want? I want the truth. You already know the truth. No, I know pieces. I sat across from him. Is your company in trouble? He didn't answer. Daniel? He finally looked at me. Yes. How much trouble? He rubbed his eyes. More than you understand. How much? He swallowed. Several million. I stared at him. And you used my trust money to keep it alive. I was going to replace it. When? When things turned around? And have they? Silence. No. I stood up. Then you didn't invest my money. What do you call it? I call it using my inheritance to protect your business. He looked at me. Would you rather the company had collapsed? Yes. He looked shocked. I would rather lose a business than lose my future. He said nothing. I walked out. That was the last night we slept in the same house. The next morning, I hired an attorney. Her name was Rachel Morgan. She was calm, direct, and completely unimpressed by Daniel's reputation. I brought everything. Bank statements, emails, trust documents, the company records, the messages. Rachel looked through them for almost an hour. Then she said, "Your mother was smarter than both of you." I looked at her. What do you mean? She included a clause that protects the trust if the manager uses the money for personal business obligations. What happens then? Management authority can be removed. Can we stop the transfers? Rachel nodded. Yes. How fast? Immediately. She made the call that afternoon. By the next morning, several accounts were frozen pending review. Daniel called me 23 times, then 30, then 40, then more. He sent message after message. What did you do? Call me. You are making a mistake. Linda, please. I didn't respond. At 12:42 p.m., my phone showed 55 missed calls. I stared at the number, 55. I remembered how embarrassed I'd been in the grocery store, how small I'd felt when that card was declined. And now I understood. That card was never the real problem. Control was. Daniel wanted to remind me that he controlled the money. He never expected me to ask who actually owned it. The investigation uncovered more than either of us expected. There were unpaid loans, properties with declining values, payments made to cover company expenses, and transfers that had never been properly documented. Rachel kept telling me the same thing: don't react emotionally. So I didn't. For the first time in my marriage, I started making decisions based entirely on facts. We recovered most of the trust assets. Some money was lost, some investments had to be sold. The business was eventually restructured. Daniel had to give up control of several properties, and the marriage ended. Not because of the money, because of the lie. When you've been married for 2 decades, you don't suddenly realize that your husband is a stranger. You realize that the version of him you believed in was incomplete. There were good years. There were real memories. There was love. I won't pretend none of it mattered, but love isn't enough when trust disappears, and trust disappears long before a marriage officially ends. Sometimes it disappears in tiny moments: a password you don't know, a bank statement you never see, a question that gets avoided, a door that suddenly has a lock, a credit card that stops working. A year later, I moved to a smaller home. It wasn't as impressive as the one Daniel and I had shared, but it was mine. My daughter visited every weekend. I started volunteering at a community center. I learned how to play tennis. I traveled. I slept better. I stopped apologizing every time I bought something I needed. One afternoon, I received a letter from Daniel. He wrote that he was sorry. He admitted he had been afraid of losing the business, afraid of losing his reputation, afraid of admitting that he had failed. He said he had convinced himself that using the trust money was temporary. He said he thought he was protecting our family. I read the letter once, then I put it away, because there was one sentence I knew was true. He wasn't protecting our family. He was protecting himself. And there is a difference. Sometimes people ask me what I would have done differently. The answer is simple. I would have asked questions sooner, not because I should have distrusted my husband from the beginning, but because trusting someone doesn't mean turning off your own judgment. Marriage is supposed to be a partnership, not a permission system, not one person making every financial decision while the other is expected to smile and trust. That morning at the grocery store, I thought I had lost access to a credit card. What I had actually gained was clarity. The declined transaction forced me to stop, to look, to ask, and eventually to choose myself. Today, when I think about that Tuesday morning, I don't remember the embarrassment. I remember the moment after I got into my car. The moment when I read Daniel's message one more time. Don't use the card anymore. Ask me first. If he had never sent that message, maybe I would have continued believing everything was fine. Maybe I would have stayed comfortable. Maybe I would have never asked the questions that saved my future. So strangely enough, I'm grateful for that declined card. It cost me a marriage. It cost me a house. It cost me years of believing I understood the person I had married. But it also gave me something back: my independence, my voice, my confidence, my life. And sometimes the smallest warning is the one that saves you from the biggest mistake. You just have to be willing to notice it. And when the truth finally shows itself, don't look away.